Hello, I'm Zachariah Julian, artistic producer for We Are the Seeds. You are listening to From Here with a View, a We Are the Seeds Philadelphia podcast. We recently had the honor of visiting with Dawn and Cassius Spears of Ashawaug Farm. In this episode, Dawn and Cassius share their philosophy as the only Indigenous owned and operated organic farm in Rhode Island. Enjoy.
Askwikwasan, Wanikiza, Natazuis, Katampanisha. My name is Dawn. Welcome to me and my husband Cassius here at our farm.
Yes, welcome to Ashawaug Farm. We're on about 6.2 acres, and we're both members of the Narragansett tribe. We have 3 children of our own and 8 grandchildren. We're invested in this farm, but it's because of our children and grandchildren and our way of life. You know, in our childhood, I should say, the way we grew up, we wanted to try to share some of that in today's world.
I was thinking we grew up with challenges, so we wanted to make sure when we were raising our children that they didn't have to face those similar challenges and try to create a better environment for them. And definitely one thing in that is for our grandchildren specifically at this point is for them to know how to feed themselves and live in a better connection to the land, because right now society does not help you maintain that. And if we're not careful, once we start our lives, you can shift away from those things that keep you connected. And so I think our role now as grandparents is to bring that back and make it in the forefront and in the present and a priority.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been together about 40 years. It's been a constant trying to build yourself, your family, and to get to our end goal, I should say, what we had in the very beginning with our plans of life. And it's been challenging. We started off in a little village, and we were there for about 36 years, and working and saving and building and raising a family. But I've always was kind of complaining a little bit about how I grew up with all my aunts and uncles around me, and we had about 80 acres of land, and we had freshwater ponds behind us and the salt marshes and the ocean in front of us, and just the diversity of wildlife and plant life there. It was just a very rich growing up in that environment. We could gather everything from wild strawberries to hazelnuts to blueberries and cranberries and raspberries, and then go down to the water and gather oysters and quahog and blue-shelled crabs, and the fishing was just unbelievable, and the water in the ponds that I'm talking about were all spring-fed, so it was crystal clear water. And you just thought the whole world was like that. When we got married, we moved to this neighborhood
that neither one of us were used to living in.
Yeah,
having people on either side of us. Though I think the one thing that made me always love our house over there was that we had a pond in the backyard, so it still made us feel like we were, like nobody could ever grow behind us or encroach us from the back. So we had our little sanctuary back there, and I think that was what saved us. It was like taking the country mouse and putting them in the city. This is not the city, but it felt like it.
Yeah. And so we had great blue herons and otters and a whole bunch of different wildlife in that little pond, and the plant life too. So it kept us going.
But we always knew that it wasn't fulfilling what we wanted for our family. Yeah.
So acquiring land is really hard, but our tribe, the Narragansett tribe, inherited about 350 acres of farmland, and so we thought, let's go to the tribe and see if we can talk about growing on this property and building that farm up for the community. And so that's what we did. We met with the chief, met with council, and we actually went to a piece of property and that 350 acres, and we actually started to grow on that. We had to do a lot of cleaning and developing and build some infrastructure on the property. And I believe that's where we planted the Narragansett Flint corn, which is a registered corn. And it was the first time, I believe, that it was planted in a communal setting
Right.
for some
Well,
time.
the first time, especially in our lifetimes, it was our own corn planted by our community, for our community, by our community. I mean, and then harvested by the community. I mean, it was perfection. That was perfection.
And we didn't grow it as a food, we grew it as a medicine.
Yes.
The idea was to have this corn celebration where we braided the corn and we gave it to our community,
Yep.
and for them to come back in the following spring and plant that corn that was given to them. So as our community grew, our cornfields were growing at the same time. And it was just, I mean, the corn was like 14 feet tall.
Well, we always grew the corn, but we always grew it as like that last row of our garden in our backyard. You know, you had like maybe 2 rows of corn just to say, we grew corn, you know. To have a field of corn takes it to the next level, but when it's a corn that you literally are connected to, I felt like it was family. And so it was a very profound moment for me as a female, I guess, to look out on that field of corn and see it growing up as tall as it was. And when you kind of like looked out into the field and saw it, and then it truly was, you know, like looking back at your ancestors or looking at your ancestors looking at you, and they were holding each other up. And that's what they say, the corn grows up and it holds each other up. And I mean, you could see it. I used to say that on that property, because it was surrounded by a cedar swamp, I used to look out into the cedar swamp and say that that looks like, you know, our ancestors looking back at us and surrounding us in this space, because we were on an island in that cedar swamp. I said, but when that corn was growing and I looked out, I was like, no, this even more so is our ancestors. This is where that connection to the earth and the plants, I mean, I feel like that's where it resonated the most. So I had a few ladies that, tribal members, that they were just like, oh, the corn is beautiful, you know, like looking at it. And I said, well, it's not just that. You need to go over and walk up close to it. And I said, and just go walk up close to it. I didn't even tell them why. And so they went walking up close to it. And then they came back and there was tears rolling down their eyes. And I said, yeah. Because when you got close to it, you could feel the energy coming off of it, and it just overwhelmed you, and it was very emotional. And so I didn't have to tell them what to feel. They felt it when they walked up. So,
And that's just one example of many, actually, that we were having these experiences of just working together as a community, working with people, friends and family, I should say, as well, and planting and rebuilding the soil and looking for these heirloom seeds of our ancestors and different families bringing these seeds in, and we're planting them, and there's just the conversation around all of that, kids running around. It just felt like a really neutral and safe place, and we was like, yeah, this is exactly, you know, what we're talking about. This is the feeling that, you know, that's been missing for quite some time, and this is what we want to share. We were full steam ahead. We just kept pushing more and more.
This was a space that Cassius set up, that he put a big arch over the entrance. And
Well, I did have this saying, leave all your dirt behind when stepping on the soil. It kind of built off of, we're coming to this place where we're just focusing on, you know, our culture and working with the soil. So the focus was really strong.
And I think there in that space, we were really creating the environment that we want to see within our tribe, within our tribal community, that that camaraderie, that community, that I don't see it otherwise. We come together occasionally, but we're not together consistently. To be able to come together over, you know, gathering food is just so much better. So
at that time and space, we were working on tribal land, and it was right in the middle of a new election. And so when we have a new chief come in and new council, the directions kind of changed a little bit on the path of that property. And so we were asked to pack up and leave.
Yeah.
And which was really hard. And we had to, you know, we had a lot of community ask us, you know, why, what's going on, And at that time, there was just, we had tribal meetings and we discussed it. It was like going into a whole different direction for us again. And we're now working at trying to hold on to something that was there. And there was a lot of energy being put into that. And I was just like, we just have to acquire land that can't be affected by a lot of change. It's got to be something that's more secure and grounded if we're going to grow, because we put a lot of energy and
put a lot of ourselves in what we do.
And a lot of the folks we felt were like dependent on, that space, and we were looking for it and the need for it. Mm-hmm. And we found this place, like I mentioned, about 6.2 acres. And we started all over again, basically. Mm-hmm. We started to apply for funding and grants, and we started to clean the property again. Did a lot of cutting brush and planting out where our gardens were going to be, where our high tunnels were going to be, which is kind of like a greenhouse, but you plant right into the soil. It just kind of extends your growing season. And we started, looking at where we're going to plant the Narragansett flint corn. And so we just started to design. So we really had to work together on that because, Dawn wanted to plant flowers. We wanted a farm store, farm stand.
Nowhere ever in my future did I envision myself being a food producer, AKA farmer. No. So I said, if I'm going to be doing this, I'm growing flowers too, because that makes me happy.
Yeah.
I can draw them. I can photograph them.
Yeah. So we did a lot of research on the property, and we found out that a lot of the soil here is called Narragansett soil, and so it's a very rich soil that's sought after. So we kind of stumbled upon that. I always say our ancestors were kind of looking out for us there. We also sit on two aquifers here that runs underneath the property as well.
Ashawaug means the land between rivers. We keep saying it means the land between two rivers, but it actually is the land between rivers.
There was a lot of groundwater here, which was excellent. And then in the back, we have a little spring that's not on our property, but runs through our property. And the water is like really ice cold, and it never dries up. And there's a little native trout swimming around in there. So we have a little forest land in the back of the property. So we have all these like components to the property. That's what we're looking for, where the forest meets the meadow. There's a lot of different type of plant and animal species that live there. Same with living at the water's edge. Same with living out in the forest itself. So it's so the diversity is kind of touches a little bit in the different areas. Mm-hmm. And we're right on the main street. So the front half of the property, you can really go into the market farming with the farm store. Mm-hmm. We just supply a lot of the vegetables that we grow into the farm store. It's an honor system. So it's basically, people come in and they kind of pick what they need. We just try to keep it supplied with produce. But our focus is not that. Our focus is getting back to building something for not just our community, but also for the larger community as well. And that's why we were putting in access roads, we're putting in water lines, hydrants, high tunnels. We're trying to slowly build property that will satisfy a lot of different uses.
But the emphasis on culture and agriculture. So we'll have more of the herb. There's an herb garden in the middle. So more opportunity to grow and dry teas, for example, and medicinal plants. So there will also be a medicinal garden. And then I also want to start some more gardens that will help supply art projects that I want to do too. Mm. So we have a lot of things we're trying to do. We grow the Narragansett flint corn, which, I'd like in the future to be able to harvest that corn and grind it and have it in our farm stand. And then strawberries, when we grow strawberries, it would be nice to even look at how we can do something with them. Because just like when the tomatoes are at their peak, the strawberries have a point where they're at their peak. So then that means we need to be looking at ways to preserve them, whether it's dehydrating them or freezing them, because then that's something that we could also have available for distribution in the future. So there's opportunities that are not necessarily about commercial profit, but also just about feeding and preserving to feed people in the off seasons.
We also are trying to use a lot of traditional knowledge and mix that with more of the modern technology as well. So we're putting in a solar powered well that will supply a lot of the gardens here. We actually built a wetu in the back. We're going to have this little village that kind of keeps us connected to our past and show a lot of different techniques of how we grew things pre-contact. So we're building that as well. And we actually used the Narragansett flint corn as a border. So when you go on one side of the cornfield, you're kind of like step back in time, but on this side, you're kind of modern technology mixed in with traditional knowledge. We healed those rows. In our culture, healing helps if we get a frost, it kind of settles down low. If we get heavy rain, it will kind of settle also in the valleys. Plus there's more soil exposed because we healed it, and it warms up the soil faster as well in an earlier time of the year. So it kind of extends the growing season as well. So we don't really want to disturb the soil too much. But if we have to, we only want to do it once. So we kind of did that right in the beginning, and from this point on, we'll just kind of build on top of those hills, build upward, instead of disturbing the soil. So some of those techniques of the past we still use, and when you come here, you'll see some of those different styles. So we'll talk a little bit about why we do certain things. But it just seems like a long, slow process because we're trying to get to that point where it's ready. That's how I feel, but Dawn constantly reminds me that it's ready all the time. You know, just come in and see what we're doing, help us work, help us build, and just kind of like grow together. And I just like try to get everything done and welcome everybody in to kind of enjoy, what's here and the space. So she helps me keep grounded on that.
First of all, our Peace-Isle neighbors don't necessarily know what we're doing over here. They're looking for sweet corn when they come into the stand. We don't have sweet corn growing here. I have to explain to them I'm growing Narragansett flint corn because I am a Narragansett tribal member, and I'm growing my corn because that's what I have to grow. And they just look at me, so when is the corn going to be ready? And it's not that kind of corn. So anyway, I will actually just buy a bag of corn to put it in there so that I can feed the community, feed the locals, so they have corn just to satisfy that, but they don't understand. So one mission here, I guess, is to share what we're doing, what our philosophy is, and why we're growing the things we're growing, and why it's important, and I think people forget there's actually a tribe in our state, so we have kind of a responsibility in being, honestly, I feel the only Indigenous farm in our state. Indigenous owned and operated farm in our state, and that we're going to pick crops that are relevant to us as Indigenous people, but we are also obviously looking to build community, so we are going to grow crops that will feed even our geographic community as well. Ironically, isn't that the same as it was when the ships arrived? They fed the people. I think we're still going to feed the community.
And yes, to be identified as a Indigenous or tribal member of the Narragansett tribe is, that's who we are, and why we do things different is because we're different in that aspect.
The best way to say it is that we need to sustain ourselves from the land that we come from. And the only way we can do that is to harvest, gather, hunt, fish, whatever you want to call it,
Well, our
from this space.
our ceremonies, our expression all comes from,
Yeah.
the environment that we live in.
Yes.
Right? So we don't separate ourselves from the environment. We're part of that environment. One of the easiest way to understand what we're trying to explain here is look at our calendar. Our calendar is totally different than the calendar
Yes.
everyone follows.
Right.
So, we're trying to set up for the green corn ceremony, green bean ceremony, the cranberry ceremony, strawberry ceremonies. We have reasons why. We got the maple syrup, we have all the different moon cycles. Our yearly timing, it kind of coincides with Mother Nature, right? The environment that we live in. So with this, our creation stories and creator and all the spiritual beings and things, inanimate and animate objects within our belief system works with us in the environment. And so when you take that away from us, you actually take our lifestyle and our culture out from us and a lot of those traditions that go with that. So this farm kind of captures a lot of that and kind of like squeezing it all into a little area to share, but there's so much more than just this little area to work with. And the main thing I would say is that we want to kind of show or lead by example and use this property kind of as a template to show how you can still work with the land and use it as a base point to express, and identify who you are and why resources are so valuable and important to you in our lifestyle.
Hello listeners, Zachariah here. I just wanted to share one of my favorite sites for buying Indigenous art and learning about Indigenous artists. An Indigenous woman-owned and operated business, ProjectAntelope.com is an innovative online marketplace that features fine arts, fashion, books, music, and home goods. If you like to support Indigenous art and artists, ProjectAntelope.com is a great place to start. Tell them I sent you.
I think what we are focused on growing is things that are heritage varieties. They're not being offered anymore because it's not a popular thing. It's not, for one, heirloom and heritage varieties are not always disease resistant. So people aren't going to grow them for a cash crop because they're finicky, they're temperamental. They're not going to necessarily produce. Something can wipe them out before they actually have fruit. So most people aren't going to take that risk. And so I feel like I'm growing things that people aren't used to seeing, and I'm bringing them back to the forefront and giving people an opportunity to experience it and indulge in it for a minute. That's the other thing, is usually tomato growers grow like maybe 4 varieties. I started 45 varieties last year, and I started 36 this year. Because, most people want just the plain red round one. And when they started seeing that orange round one, they were like, And then they tasted it, and they're like, oh, okay. So then they'd get a container of the oranges and a container of the reds. Well, now I'm doing mixes. And, again, from a financial aspect of it, maybe that's not the best move, but I'm happy. I'm presenting this little pint container that's got all different tastes in it, not just the sweet gumdrop taste. It's got a variety that can be used for different things. And
I'm just going to say this, all right? Yeah, she starts her tomatoes inside the house in March by seed, and she's over there spritzing them and talking to them and getting them started, and then from there she brings them outside and she hardens them and brings them back in a little bit, and then she has all these steps before she actually brings them in.
I have to pot them up too.
Yep.
They don't stay in their original cells. They have to get potted up, if not once, sometimes twice.
Yep. And then she brings them in and she plants them all together, and she has them all labeled, and she's like all excited that this one is this and this one is that. And I was educated because then when we went to a market and she had laid these all out, and the people that came and seen all these different colors, it just attracts different people or certain people. and they come and they just, they're in awe of these tomatoes, and they pick them up, and the flavor is there, and she tells a story about, oh, well, this one and is really temperamental, but I did this, and I had to do this. And she's talking to them like they were, like children that she nurtured up and put a lot of time and invested a lot into them. And that part's kind of cool. I think that's that traditional way of being really close and associated with this life, this plant, this sister, right, in a sense.
Yeah.
So, and that, again, that brings me back to, that's what we're looking for here. That feeling, that connection, that's what we're trying to show, it's so important.
So at Ashawaug Farm, we have a huge educational dream, I will say. One, we have market gardens happening in the front of the property, and all of those can be used, again, for teaching and sharing how to set up those things. We can show irrigation systems, we can show intercropping, companion planting, we can show seasonal crops and even succession gardening as well, so that you would grow what you can grow at different times. And then we have herb gardens, so within the herb garden, it's about drying and saving teas, and with all of it, there's also the whole canning and food preservation. So drying, I want to have a drying shed. I want to dry squash, dry strawberries. And then, obviously there's seed saving, but there's the starting of the seeds and knowing what equipment to buy for starting your seeds, but also knowing what equipment to buy and what tools to buy to grow and use in your garden. I feel like we've got all the information here, and now we just have to figure out and organize how to share that information. One other thing though, we also want on this property to have a walking trail that goes around the exterior perimeter. And then we have a weechu in the back, which is also going to be a space for sharing more of the traditional side of things. So we'll have the tools and implements that our ancestors would use, but also even how we would store our seeds in the past, how we store our seeds today. So for everything that we show both sides of it. And in some cases, maybe the older way was the way that should have been maintained too. It's still useful. It hasn't gone. That hasn't been outdated. So we should still practice that. The walking tour in the back. It's just beautiful in the backside of our property that it's an opportunity to have there's little pockets and little areas where you could just have little just peaceful moments. We want to have a trail that has plants identified and labeled, but also little seating areas where you can just relax and take time out. And so that's when he was saying that this being a kind of a place for people, we want people to know that you can come here and kind of recharge, Mm-hmm.
You might want to tap into our website, right, and learn a little bit more about the different things that we can do here on Ashawaug Farm. I don't know, but anyway, there's so much to learn here at Ashawaug Farm. By the time you're finished, you should be able to, they say 4 things, I believe it is, plant, harvest, store, and package. So we'll teach you those things here on Ashawaug Farm.
For more information on Ashawaug Farm, please visit ashawaugproject.com. Thank you for joining us for this episode of From Here with a View, a We Are the Seeds Philadelphia podcast. Please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review. You'll be helping us grow our listener community and elevate the impact of our podcast. You can learn more about this podcast at wearetheseeds.org. From Here with a View is executive produced by Michelle St. John with Zachariah Julian and Tyler Nagoyo producing. Sound mixing and original theme music by Zachariah Julian. To listen to more from Zachariah, follow him on Spotify and Apple Music. From Here with a View logo art was inspired by an original oil pastel drawing by artist Jason Weesaw. Graphic design by Fernanda Leon. This podcast was funded in part by Independence Public Media Foundation. We'll see you next time on From Here with a View.